Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends, there I am. There's Bailey. Good to see you all. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Great to see the chat section already starting to fire up well before our first pairing of the night. Now, we are experiencing some very minor technical difficulties with our main host, Krsna, who's going to be joining us, of course, doing these pairings with us. But, of course, we have all the other guests to bring in, so I'm going to bring them in now. First, I'm going to bring in Durbage. There he is.
Hey, there I am. Hello.
And I'm going to also bring in Adam from our team, who's joining us tonight for the pairings. And
hello.
Here we go. This is we're just going to bring in Krsna, who's maybe we can see how his camera is going. But in the meantime, no, stop. Why are people saying 240p, Bailey? I'm on the HD camera tonight. I've set it all up.
It looks 240p, man.
I think 240 is generous.
Well, as long as everyone can hear me, it's fine. It's fine because we're going to have the same issue with Krsna, who I'm just going to pump into the stream here. There he is. And Krsna, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you guys. Can you hear me is the question.
Yeah, yes. we can. But
okay, perfect. Sorry, we're still trying to sort out our little video issues, but we'll continue with some audio for the meantime.
So you're on black screen. I'm on below 240p resolution on this 4K camera. That's always encouraging.
That's fine. That's all right. It happens, but you know what's the best part is everyone gets to eat chocolate and whiskey and Armagnac and wonderful American whiskey, so we can keep them entertained.
So we're gonna do some amazing pairings tonight, and we had this event live in person just last Saturday in Melbourne. And I think a couple of us can already attest to this being our fourth year working together with Krsna with Basic Chocolates pairings, and also probably the most wild chocolates that he's ever created with these whiskeys. I should say with these spirits. 4 of them are whiskeys. One of them is an Armagnac tonight. Now, I'm also just going to quickly make mention, of course, that all of the casks except for 68.80 are available tonight on the site. So there's the QR straight to the link of the those particular products that are on tonight. You can scan that straight away and grab any bottling. Now, of course, we're also running a little promo tonight, which I'm going to mention nice and early because we have so much going on. Here it is. I'm going to throw it up on screen. It's our basic SMWS month. So just use the code BASIC15 to activate free shipping tonight, and that's only for tonight. Of course, those who are tuning in tonight, of course, can take advantage of that. So, I think that's enough talking for now. How about we kick off with the first pairing? As long as everyone can hear Krsna, I think we'll be good to go.
Awesome. So, I'm still in.
Yeah. Lead us along. Which one are we pouring first? Now, folks, the order is different from what might look like on your tasting mat.
Correct. So, yeah, I believe if everyone's got their Black Forest tiramisu,
yep,
we're going to start off with that one. That's our first pairing for the evening. The chocolate that you're actually going to be picking up, and I'm hoping that the boys can help me out with the video that you guys can help our audience and guests with.
Yep.
It's sort of a burnt, sort of like orange sort of color with some green speckles on the end.
This is Black Forest cake
bar that we're going to be going with our pairings.
Andrew, if you can hold yours up for a second, Andrew. It's the sort of the burnt orange looking one. Andrew's going to hold it up for us all to see. There it is. That's the one we're going to start with. So it's sort of the it's sort of like light brown, burnished orange sort of looking one.
In the hand,
that's right. And so the first flavor for this, of course, as you all might know, we're doing distillery 68.80. This is called titled as Black Forest Tiramisu. Without a doubt, just on its own, I think it really lends into the name itself. So I kind of took it on a literal sense and just sort of did a take on what I would imagine a Black Forest tiramisu might be. So in my mind, it was things like mascarpone and of course some more sort of richer cherries that were kind of spiked in order to kind of get that sort of those flavors. So at the moment, being winter and right in the heart of it still, and it's still a couple of weeks away before we hit spring. But so I decided to go with with blackberries, which are currently in season. And the beauty about this as well is we got to kind of do that with some cherries. We left them to kind of macerate together, and then we spiked the hell out of it with a lot of Angostura bitters, just to kind of give it some of those nuances and some of the notes that are actually going to be, I think, going to work incredibly well with 68.80. So of course, I thought I'd give everyone a bit of a quick rundown as to the proceedings of the event and how we are going to cue you as part of the pairings. We're going to change things up a little bit as well as we go along for the rest of the night. But to start this one off, what's going to happen is I'm going to invite you to take a sip of your Black Forest Tiramisu drams now, just to coat your palate. Just take a tiny little coat if you haven't already done so. And once you've done that, I'm going to actually count everyone in a 3, 2, 1 format. I wish there's some video because I've actually just done the little pairing myself and I'm kind of salivating a little bit at the moment. But I'll get you all to kind of take a little bit of a sip. And once you've done that, I'll count you all in with a 3, 2, 1. Invite you to take a little bite of your orange bars and just allow that to kind of muddle over. The first thing you should probably get is that wonderful, rich cherry-like and blackberry sort of note. It's kind of very compote jammy, and it just starts to kind of muddle over to being a bit more Black Forest just about now. Just as that kind of chocolatey, creamy, cremeux sort of note kicks off, I invite you to take a bigger sip of your whiskey right now and take a big bite as well of the remainder of your chocolate bar, just to kind of let that go together. And this is where it kind of really steps up a notch. Now you get that tiramisu creaminess from that mascarpone sort of like note. You're getting all these kind of rich, wonderful poppy sort of spices, and that they're all coming through from those Angostura bitters, that kind of nutmeg and that little bit of that sort of ginger-like spice as well that's kind of also in between there. And then now I think it just starts to come back full circle with that little bit of salt in the background. And this is where you get that real chocolatey, cake-like nostalgia moment that just finishes off with that lingering sort of cherry notes on the back as well. It's just really Moorish, but if you nose your whiskey now as well, you start to notice that what you're tasting in terms of that chocolatiness kind of also is at the back of the nose in the glass as well. It kind of works together both at the same time, which is really beautiful.
I'm getting a really strong sense of ginger coming through, like a gingerbread.
Yeah, and I think that really comes from the dram more so than the chocolate itself. Right. And potentially also that interaction between the Angostura bitters, that whole that light herbaceousness and that combination between all of that, because it's subtle, it's not too dominant, but it's just kind of there in the background playing around with the dram itself.
Wow. That's quite
also
special.
I should also say hello everyone. I feel like I just missed the introductions. We went straight in. G'day Adam, g'day Matt, and g'day AD. It's been a long time.
Krsna.
Pleasure as always.
Excellent.
Good to see you, mate.
What do we think of round one?
Yeah, I think I loved it. It's I agree with Andrew. There's definitely sort of like a ginger note, and I think I get more and more of it as I go back to that dram in between that chocolate. Like it's got there's a lovely sort of like ginger and salt and nutmeg sort of note in there, which is just lovely.
Yeah, the salty dryness is really intriguing, and that's not a euphemism. It's genuinely intriguing. It's fascinating when you compare those two. Certainly takes the dram in a pleasantly drier direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely. I think. Look, I mean, we discussed this. I think in the past with what sort of ways that you would look at doing some pairings, and I think in this particular side, I think my mind was for the first time ever was just kind of not going with a sort of polarizing left of field sort of something that might be a sort of a balance. Sort of like when you do something like say a lemon curd dessert is something that's, you know, really sweet and caramel-like in nature to balance the elements. But in this one, I think I feel like this is that beautiful marriage between dram and flavor pairing. So I wanted to hone in a little bit more on that, and I think it's probably where that saltiness is kind of really helping out as well. And just keep in mind that between a kilo of the ganache per kilo, the ratio of salt is 1 gram. Just to give you a perspective of what you're tasting. So a lot of this, because a lot of people don't realize that. Go, oh, okay, you must put a nice generous serving, like as if, you know, you see it on those little food videos, and they generally salt everything. Now, a lot of this stuff, that there's time and process involved with creating a balanced recipe, and often, you don't need a lot of salt because you can rely on things like the whiskey and the rest of the combinations to actually do the work for you, as opposed to, what it is.
I'll just make mention to those following along at home with their virtual packs. I just want to talk about this in between pairings. The amount of time and effort that goes into creating each of these chocolates and each of these pairings is quite a long time in some cases, and that's why sometimes you'll see some of the casks like 68.80 that we've started with. It's a cask that is long gone, unfortunately. Like there's no availability for sales on this one tonight, but it's because when we first picked this out to work with Krsna on pairing, we had plenty of it then, but sometimes it takes this long for us, this process to work. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it, is that there's so much effort that goes into creating each of these chocolates for each of these whiskeys that we've presented him. And I've sent these samples to him, it must be 5, 6, 7 months before right now, which is just phenomenal. And I think I made mention of this at the in-person tasting of this, of saying that Krishna's attention to detail with this kind of thing is what blows my mind. When he calls me at, say, 11:15 on a Tuesday night and says, I can get this different matcha salt out of Japan, but it's $6 per kilo heavier and it's going to cost this much difference. And I'll reply with saying, if it makes a difference to the flavor, do it, and please don't call me this late. So it's sort of, it would be one of those sort of instances of just his passion for the project is unmatched, and your energy for creating these is blows my mind.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you, gents. And thank you everyone as well that's participating tonight. I know there's a lot of familiar names popping up, and a lot of those Oz post bags that I wrote out myself. So good day to everyone. Thank you.
I'm going to echo a comment that just popped up here, and it's that swapping to the bars was a brilliant idea. I agree that I think these long bars are absolutely sensational.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Look, I mean, it's a mold, and keep in mind, I know we've done the 2 pieces in the past as the bonbons as well. It's roughly about the same thing. The bars just give you just a smidge more, but it's also the fact that the height of the snack bars allow you to actually do a little bit more, because they're kind of meant to be like a dessert style snack bar. So, we've always had the ability to kind of just tinker and add a little bit more in terms of finesse to what there is versus a smaller bonbon. So, and we'll kind of see that in the next and second pairing coming up as well.
It's a bit more tangible than that, mate, too. It's also my spouse looking off to the side here. I could have a piece of that too. So.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, much more substantial. Absolutely, like going from the bonbons to the bars is much more substantial. It's fantastic.
Excellent. All right. Well, should we roll into number 2?
Just before we do, Krsna, did you want to have another stab at fixing that camera, or we still?
We are actively trying to get it sorted, but we're worried that if we do that, we'll actually have to log off and log back on.
I mean, we can talk amongst ourselves for a minute.
You can do that.
Do you want to give us 2 minutes and we'll give it a whirl?
Why don't you? Because we could talk about this amazing distillery 68.
Perfect. Please do. Excellent. Thank you.
So jump out for a second. Krishna's going to try and fix his camera issues going on here, so he's just going to jump out for a minute. Now, AD 68.
68. Well, wonderful distillery. Would you agree with me? It's a sleeper. It's always a sleeper cask. It's a dare I say, a non-sexy distillery. It's one that doesn't have a great single malt presence. It's really only through the independents that most Australian drinkers would be familiar with it. And you'd have to say that the society just seems to be kicking goals with it every time we get a cask of it, either straight from the distillery. It's been a favourite cask of ours for wanting to give some extra maturation or to finish in some other projects. And how often have we just had this unsuspecting, innocent 68 and just gone, wow, how incredible is that?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm actually kind of worried that because it's such a sleeper and what's coming out of 68 is so good at the moment that it might end up getting the phrase I like to use is malt lacquefied, and it might end up being a luxury single malt in maybe years to come, because people will go, oh, maybe it's actually got legs to stand as a single malt, and it absolutely does. It's always that there's a nuttiness I get out of 68s. There's always like a hazelnut, roasted chestnut kind of vibe. It's a very nutty spirit, and I think that serves it well. We'll just throw a few comments. Adam, you've had a few 68s as well that you've quite gushed over as well over the last couple of years.
I would say 68 is probably my second favorite distillery from SMWS if I had to pick one. I mean, that one we put out last year, Smoking Bananas in a Frankincense Den, which was November malt of the month.
Yeah.
I mean, that disappeared, and rightly so. I fell in love with that as soon as I had it. That was probably my pick of the year. But I'd agree with the that sort of chestnut note that they all have in common. I don't know if I'd call them a sleeper anymore for SMWS codes. I mean, I'm not sure about the single malt, but I feel like our members are starting to really pick up on the 68s. And I know there's one particular member in Tasmania who would gush over any 68. But,
shout out to he's my jam.
Someone else made a great point that it was a sleeper until Whiskey and Ailment got their hands on one of them. It was the other comment that came out. The other thing too that what a lot of people might not appreciate is it's a wonderful distillery to visit. It's in Pitlochry. Famously, there are two distilleries there, and everyone seems to pounce or go to the other distillery, which is Edredale, and which always used to market itself as the smallest distillery in Scotland, and it can't really hold that title anymore. But it's still a very quaint, very beautiful distillery to go to. But it has not reopened yet for members to the public since COVID. So it's still actually shut down. So if you go to the beautiful town of Pitlochry, which is about halfway, if you take Edinburgh and Glasgow and then Speyside up the top there, Pitlochry is about halfway, about a 90-minute, if you're a very slow driver, 2-hour drive from the capital cities down there. Edinburgh and Glasgow. And you can pop into, as you drive into Pitlochry from the south, this distillery, number 68, is waiting there for you. It's got a great visitor centre, do some amazing tours. And I can tell you it's actually the first Scottish distillery I ever visited 23 years ago.
Yeah.
First one.
Very cool.
Wow. We did this one in the morning, and we went up to up the road to Edredale in the afternoon.
Very cool. Question here from Dave Cook, and I'm going to answer this on behalf of everything going on here. What is the order, please? The order is being announced as we go along just because of how the pairings work. So we've started with the 68.80. I'm going to let Krsna introduce the next one, which I have an inkling as to what it is. I think it's the A9.1. But
I believe it's the A9, the CW, then the 73, and then we end with the 10. I'm just not sure which chocolate bars they pair with. Although I'm pretty sure the red chocolate bar is next, pairing with the A.
AD's got a card that came with his, which is more than we can say about our packs. So he might have a bit more data here. I'm going to bring him up. Boom, there we go. So there's the card. You can get an idea of where we're going with each whiskey. We've started with the Black Forest cake, and then we're going to move to the A9.1, but we'll get Krsna to introduce what that looks like in just a moment.
I'm about 99% sure it's the number 3 macadamia and tonka bean praline, which was probably my favorite bar from the tasting on Saturday. Yeah,
that's the one. So we'll just see how Krishna's traveling along here. Our kids are getting nowhere near these. Mind you, they have tails and 4 legs, though. So okay, that helps.
Fair call.
And someone's asking how old was AD 23 years ago. That's up to
23 years less than I am now.
There you go. Timeless.
I don't know what to read into that. I'm only 30. It's not my fault. I went to a distillery when I was 7. And for those doubting me, I'm sorry. I've had a tough life. Okay,
it's a hard knock life.
So rolling barrels when you were 7. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is what happens when you don't use moisturizer.
Just to rub a bit of Bamor behind the neck. Okay, look, I think we've got Krsna coming back into the stream. I'm not sure he's got camera access, but we do need to press on.
I think we're still having issues, but we're gonna try one more solution after this. So we'll get you guys going on round 2 via audio. We do apologize, folks. A little bit.
That's right. As long as we know which one's which, and I'm going to enlarge Andrew's screen for each one as we go. So.
So I saw there was a question from good old Dave. Hey, Dave. So it's going through in the order of the orange, then the red, then the blue, purple, and the black. So from left down to right down. Okay, cool. So the next one along is the one that's called macadamia and tonka bean praline, and that's the sort of reddish. Reddish one with some black speckles on the end, on the corner.
Yep, so black speckles, reddish one with the black speckles, not the sort of the burnished, not the sort of purplish one with the orange speckles, which looks a little bit close, but yeah, definitely the reddish one with the black speckles, folks. Correct. And that's with the Armagnac, isn't it?
Correct. Yes, muscat and meringue.
That was my next question. Which spirit to reach for?
Right. So we'll be doing this with muscat and meringue. A9.1, I believe.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, so of course, I'm a massive fan of Armagnacs. A little bit of history and context here. For the last 4 years, I've been quietly pestering Mr. Bailey to put in an Armagnac in the list, or have an opportunity to work with an Armagnac for a tasting in any capacity, and wishes received. And so now I thought, seeing as we had the opportunity to do this, I want to preface that this time we're going to be changing the way that we do the tasting here. So instead of getting you to take a sip of your whiskey, I'm going to actually invite you to put your glasses down very quickly, and we're actually going to try the chocolate first on its own, because you've got a little bit of that snack bar to munch on, and there's a reason for this. We did this in Melbourne, and I think a lot of people were very surprised by the polarizing effects of this. Now, very quickly, before you take a quick bite, I know Mr. Bailey already has done so. Oh, no, Mr. AD has done so. Go. All right, excellent. Well, look, if you're going to eat, start eating.
Sorry, Justin.
It's a 3-way praline of macadamia and tonka. So if you haven't already done so, just take a big chomp and take a bite. I want you to explore this in your time. The beauty about this is there's this sort of transition in layers. It starts off very nutty and buttery, and then now it starts to go into buttered corn. All of this in the reaction of just 2 ingredients and 3 layers. And then now it starts to become very spicy, coconutty, almost like fresh desiccated coconut with a lot of rich, sweet spices. It's a combination of it all, and all of that's coming from the tonka beans itself. There's no coconut, there's no additional spices, all from the reaction of the 2 together. And then now it starts to get really creamy and white chocolatey, and it just kind of comes through to a crescendo. Now, the reason why I invited you all to try the bar at the start, and I wanted you all to have the opportunity to explore this, is because this is one of Basic's first 5 flavors ever created. This is still one of the OGs that I've ever had. It's something that's quite unique and quite special to me, and I wanted you to be able to have the opportunity to try it as is. Now, what I would like you to do is take a sip of your Armagnac, please. If you haven't already done so, you'll probably start to notice that there's a bit of a tingle on your palate because of the spices that were reminiscing on the back. But now I invite you to take a bigger chomp of your bar together as it's there, and you'll start to notice what happened in the middle is really prevalent at the start. Lots of buttered popcorn, this kind of real rich molasses, muscovado-like note is now more prevalent, which is as per the name. You start to get that sugary element at the back palate as well as you start to salivate right about now, AD. I can see it in your face. Just like that, the salt starts to kick off. And now you get more coconut, more intense, but it's almost savory like as opposed to sweeter when we first started off with it. Super Morris. This is probably still, I would say, if I had to categorize top 3 flavors of all time that I've ever done, and we're at 178 individual combinations, this has to be probably the top 3 that I've ever done. And it's the one that most people are always kind of perplexed by because of the transitions of just having literally 2 ingredients in there as the core. What do we think? I feel like AD is in limbo at the moment. Flavor limbo.
It's not limbo, out, mate. It's
Do you need a black screen camera right now, AD?
When your taste buds are somewhere between 100 and 200 kilometers an hour, I wouldn't be calling it limbo. It's
yeah, someone's said the buttered popcorn note is very it comes out on the second phase of that just then. I know you mentioned it, Krsna, but it's people are also seeing that in the comments of that that buttered popcorn note comes through. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, so this was really interesting. The Armagnac itself, when I had a chance to sip this the first time, just as the samples came through, I felt that it had all the elements of what I would expect from an aged Armagnac, right? Than just the standard Bass Armagnac at a 5-year-old VSOP or something like that. This has got some age to it, of course. It's quite noticeable. I think what was really unique for it was the fact that I feel like there's a moment in this Armagnac, if you have it on its own, where it kind of almost feels like there's sort of like a piece in the puzzle that's missing. And so the first thing that went to my mind when I sat down with this was that it actually needs something to kind of bridge the gap. And the only thing I could think of that really would sing and allow the Armagnac to be, truly the best version of itself is with this macadamia and tonka praline. And you can have a look inside in the middle of your bar. If you've taken a chomp, you can see the 3 layers. That's part of the labor of love in terms of getting the work done. So the 240p blur is my favorite part of being able to see. Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
Excellent, thank you.
I feel like you had some left.
Yeah.
What I found really extraordinary about that as and you've touched on it already, but Armagnac is an amazing spirit. I don't care much for brandy, and usually I do really like Armagnac and a great Armagnac at that. And this is one of those. But something that the chocolate did with that one, it turned the Armagnac into, and I hope this doesn't sound outrageous, but a fruity bourbon.
Very much so. I very much felt the same. Yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing, by the way.
I think it's that Muscovado. I think it's got that dark sugar note versus the kind of more syrupy. Because I have bourbons, and maybe it's just because my palate's quite attuned to it, and we do use it in some capacity for balancing recipes. But glucose is there, and that's a byproduct of course, your traditional corn syrup. And whatnot, and you find that you can. I find that I can taste those notes, but I think in this Armagnac, I think it's just the allowance of being able to have and keep in mind with the macadamia and tonka bar. There's probably most pralines that we would do. I've always favoured more nuts versus sugar. So it's usually, I always do a balance of either like a 60 to 40 or a 55% to 45%, depending on what it is. But with the macadamia and tonka bar that you're having now, that's a 70-30. So hence the reason why that moorishness is there, and the reason why you're getting more of that buttered popcorn and you're getting more of that chocolatey elements that are there. It just allows it to do its thing without too much interference.
I know there's definitely Armagnac is often referred to as sort of like a alternative for many whiskey drinkers. It's a I know quite a few sort of whiskey drinkers that quite like Armagnacs, and I can see why. It's a very distinct, different spirit from all the other brandies. It is a type of brandy for those who are less familiar with the category, and it's all single distilled in the southwest region of France, in the Armagnac region of France. And it's usually, a lot of it is column stilled. Most of it's column still, and most of it is gypsy distilled as well. So it's there's
that was always the thing, wasn't it? Traditionally, they were what they used to call the peripatetic stills, which were basically the stills that were mounted on the back of a cart on wheels, and they just roamed around the countryside distilling.
Yeah, and they'd often stay at the winery for sometimes 2, 3, 4 weeks, just of using unused grapes and using Ugna Blanc and Barco and Colombard and everything like that.
Yeah.
But it's and as a result of being single distilled, you'll often see it's often a little bit lower proof as a result. So, I mean, this one is sitting at 51.9%, which is actually pretty high for cask strength Armagnac. And we've seen quite a few at the Society in that 43 to 48% ABV. Cask strength still, obviously, like, not watered down to 40 or anything like that. But this is a 2007 vintage, which is, this is actually, it's delightful. And it's also a .1. So the first one we've seen from A9. How are we going? I think Krishna's just
I'm still here. I'm just listening to the little knowledge sesh and appreciating it.
Great comment here. I now know how to enjoy Armagnac using Basic to turn it into a glorious bourbon. Yeah, I mean, Andrew was right on. Like it's almost adopted this year high corn sort of bourbony sort of aspect to it, strangely, which I wasn't ready for, which is great.
Matt, I can't remember whether you were there for the event or not. It was about 5-6 years ago, and we did a French call it a whiskey dinner at the place up at Pimble in Sydney here.
I remember,
but it wasn't a whiskey dinner. It was an Armagnac and cognac dinner, basically. And we had, I think, from memory, two Armagnacs and 3 Society cognacs, which we paired with the food that night in this amazing French restaurant. And I thought that night was absolutely brilliant, but I'm now realizing we missed one ingredient. That was a basic chocolate like this to go with it. That would have really topped off dessert that night.
Oh, absolutely. That was a fantastic night, though. And there were some marvelous pairings. I think that was the last showing of C1 as well at that
Correct.
Dinner.
Yeah, you're right. It was
2 bottles of it or something, and they vanished very quickly.
They did.
Well,
awesome. Well, shall we start looking into option number 3?
Yeah, sure. And please, folks, those who are following along at home. Sorry, Andrew.
I just said which whiskey or spirit do we reach for?
Okay, so you'll be reaching for buttery corn on the cob, or buttery baked corn on the cob. Sorry.
And that's the blue bar with the white speckles. Am I getting that right?
Correct. Termundo.
Fantastic. Okay.
So I don't know if anyone's figured out that the colors are very SMWS themed to the bottle colors. I'm surprised that no one's picked that up. So.
Oh my gosh! You mean the chocolates have flavor profile colors?
Exactly. That's right. All right. So this one, before we start, I think this, if I'm not mistaken, this had the highest ABV.
66.9%.
66.9%, right? So look, I mean, it's the first thing that I recognized with this. It's it was something that's quite young, quite intense as well as a whiskey. To start off with, of course, is an American corn-based whiskey, and as per the name. So I wanted to tell you all a little bit about the blue bar before we actually take a sip for our whiskey in front of us. I've mentioned this in Melbourne, and I've mentioned this several times before. I really hate certain combinations of whiskey. I mean, of flavors and in particular with chocolate. And one thing that I despise significantly is orange and dark chocolate. It's a combination that's too old and ancient, and it needs to die. But sadly, despite my well wishes, I remember that some of the questions that were asked of me earlier for our Outturn magazine release was, how do I think about flavors, and do we have anything that's there that might, provoke the palate, so to speak, or make us think differently about things. And I thought I should step out and show you that if we were to do something with orange and chocolate, which, by the way, we did do last year, but being this the core focus, that we could really show people an opportunity of how to really step past your biasness and focus on what the pairing can deliver, right? We got to do that last year, obviously, with hot shots as well. We got to step outside the comfort zone and do something a bit different. This time around, I believe this is the dram that allows us to have that opportunity. I've reserved my comments for some of the hot shot lovers that are on this stream. So what we've done is we've used something that we did last year, which is a reappearance from our wonderful Japanese supplier over at the Good Grub Hub, based in Melbourne, of course. So this is a Mikan Mandarin jelly. The Mikan Mandarin jelly, I want you to know that what we did was, as you'd make your jams or marmalades or spreads, obviously there's a ratio of sugar involved in that process. What we did was we got that sugar a couple of weeks back. As soon as we started the discussion on pairings with Matt, and as soon as we tried the samples, I threw a bunch of Lipton tea bags into the sugar and sealed it up shut for a couple of weeks. And so you might be thinking there's this prevalent note of Lipton tea, but there isn't actually. It's all, what it does is it's going to lend into the savouriness of the buttery corn and the cob sort of note that we're trying to hunt for. So without further ado, I won't talk anymore. I'll get you going. Please take a little sip of your whiskey if you haven't already done so. And then I'm going to count you all in. This time we're going to go with the usual format like we did with number one. So I'll get you to start in 3, 2, 1. Please take a little bite of your chocolate now. This is by far that wonderful moment at the start. It's this kind of real more savory-esque orange, almost thick like a marmalade in texture. But just at the same time, you're getting this kind of dark chocolate rollover effect at the midsection and the back section of your palate. But just about now, it just gets really thick and creamy and almost like gelatinous in some way as well in texture. I invite you to take a bigger sip of your dram now at this point, and also take a bigger bite of your chocolate at the same time. Could get a bit messy, but it's probably going to give you the nostalgia element that a lot of people have grown up with, which is that Terry's chocolate orange or that orange Jaffa. But just in the back palate as well, there's this lingering savory-esque note that's just there, that's still almost tea-like in sensation. It's got that astringency just rolling off in the back corner. And just around that same time, there's some of that salt and butteriness that's kind of there. The whiskey's quite hot, of course, so you're getting a lot going on at the front of your palate, but you should kind of find that the dark chocolate's kind of pulling it all down and allowing you to kind of enjoy a little bit more of this as the length continues on and on and on. And it just doesn't stop really as well. That's the beauty about this. And you'll start to notice that there's some more nuances between the whiskey and also the chocolate as well at the same time.
Wow. Maybe it's something you said earlier, Krsna, but I'm still getting that, even especially on the finish of both of those, that black tea. That's
it's there. It's not going to be dominant. It's just going to be there just to kind of help nurture the spirit as well. Like that's really the core reason for the tea aspect. I called it, I think, something along the lines of English breakfast a la orange Jaffa. Like a splice of the two common things that we know of. What are your thoughts, AD? I feel like you're really, this is one of those ones that has the more sort of polarizing effect in flavors that you can kind of debunk a bit for us.
No, actually, I wouldn't call the experience polarizing at all. what I would say, some of your matches take something and something and create something more complex, like a kaleidoscope of flavors, and you've really got to struggle hard to. Sorry, you've got to work hard to get all the amazing sparkles of flavor that just flood your taste buds. With this one, rather than it being amazingly complex, for me personally, I'm finding it amazingly delicious, but it's more integrated. It's not
Correct.
as
It's that cohesiveness that we talked about in terms of some of the other pairings that we've done in the past. Exactly.
Yeah.
So instead of having this bright array of, a rainbow with, say, 52 shades instead of something that's a little bit more simple, this is really quite direct and easy to understand. I think it also is probably because the whiskey itself is something that is also, in my opinion, quite direct and easy to understand, and it's young. So it needs some help, right? It's like, and I think that's where the focus was with this, about trying to keep things in the spirit of comfort. That's I don't know. That's the first thing that I associated with this dram. Yeah. And look, English Jaffa cake biscuits. That's definitely some of those sort of notes that are there.
I think it's definitely a 1 + 1 = 3 experience, but the 3 is just this wonderful, juicy, tasty thing that is so damn delicious. But I don't feel the need to try and pick it apart and to identify the 20 flavors. I'm just happy to take it. This is just a glorious, tasty experience, and texturally, I think it's amazing as well.
Awesome, thank you. Hey, we're gonna do one more troubleshoot while you guys discuss the whiskey, and we might have some luck with getting us on screen. Give us a tick. Thank you.
So new code prefix, I should say, for the SMWS, the CW. Really exciting to see these through. These are corn whiskies, not to be confused with bourbon, although not too far apart really in some ways. It's just extremely high corn mash on this one. So when we see the B codes like the bourbons through, we'll see things like there might be 55, 65, 68% corn mash bills, with the rest made up from rye and wheat and a bit of barley. But in this case, if you see a CW, it just means it's a corn whiskey, which is what it stands for, which is extremely high corn. In fact, this one I think isn't. I'll have to double check. I think it's 95% corn. This one.
So it doesn't actually have to be 100% corn to be a corn whiskey. Then
it just has to be really high corn. It's a bit like the laws in the US around that are similar to the bottled in bond act. It's can be recommended to be observed. That it be very high.
Right.
Is it not also a case, Matt? I mean, in order to be legally a bourbon, it's has to have a minimum corn percentage of 51%. But the other thing that automatically by default makes a whiskey a corn whiskey is if it's more than 51% and it's put into a refill cask. Because to legally be called bourbon, you can only use the cask once. So you could make something that would otherwise entirely be a bourbon, but you fill it into a second fill or a refill cask, and you can't legally call it bourbon. By definition, it is then corn whiskey. And I'm wondering whether, independent of the mash bill on this one, whether that's also a factor, because this is actually from a refill cask.
That might be the thing. Yeah.
So does that mean that then a corn whiskey, so a mash bill with a high corn percentage, can't be matured in just a fresh cask, like a virgin oak?
It could. It was filled in virgin oak, and as long as it was 51% and wasn't distilled to a proof higher than 94% ABV, it can still be a bourbon.
No, but could it still be a corn? Like, does corn have to be refill?
I'm here.
No, corn doesn't have to be refill.
We've done it.
I'm so glad you appeared, because Adam just asked a tricky question I didn't know the answer to, and then you appeared. So like, wow. That's,
what question?
Right, excellent. Curious, what is the question? Because I lost a bit of audio in that time. So,
because I thought you were saying that a corn has to be a refill.
No. It doesn't have to be a refill.
All right.
Okay.
But it can be. Whereas but bourbon can't be refill.
Yeah, I knew bourbon couldn't be refilled, but okay.
Yeah.
So corn could be virgin oak as well, if it's just a very high percentage of corn.
Could be anything. It could be a second fill musket barrel for all we care. The
There's-
thing is,
there's- There's a comment you've just put up on the screen at the moment, and that point there is correct. Corn whiskey is 80% corn, but you could make a spirit with 81% corn, and it can still be a bourbon. So
Michael Landis is corn whiskey minimum 80% corn. Yeah, Michael, you and the other Facebook user is Michael. I know you know this stuff, so that's probably a good one to throw up. It's just a comment on cask supply for a second, but that's one of the reasons why we're seeing ex-bourbon barrels actually going up in price a fair bit in the last couple of years is because of prevalence of corn whiskeys and American single malts that now can use those ex-bourbon casks themselves. Someone told me the other day that there's now 1,000 distilleries in the US making single malt. Think about that for a second. Like, we already knew there was like 5,000 distilleries in the US already, but there's 1,000 making single malt. So that's already 3 times more than
What numbers that equate to if you put that in the metric system?
How many football fields is that?
Yeah. How many fathoms is it, and how many football fields long is that distillate run?
Have you got your publisher yet, AD, for most of these lines that we've been quipping over the 4 years? Surely, come on, man! By now, there'll be something like you can get it, especially when you walk inside Glenfarclas.
Mate, I can't even afford a green screen to cover 2/3 of my room. You can see I've only got 2/3 of the vaults behind me.
Hey, there's no green screen. This is not a green screen, by the way. This is literally a black cloth. We're in a garage. This is as ad hoc as it gets. This is as basic as it gets. There you go.
Oh, I like it. There you go.
Yeah.
Well done.
And
So
he's
he's here.
A green screen. I thought you just had a printout of the vaults. It actually looks pretty decent for a green screen.
I just don't want people to see how messy the back of my study is. That's all.
Yeah.
Fine. There's no judgment passed. I think that's the beauty.
Okay,
awesome.
Great. Well, now that you're here for the last two, and in person and on screen, this is great. We're only 3/5 of the way in, so let's go for number 4. So you're going to lead us into the next one.
Excellent. All right, so round 2 now, in theory, of things that I despise, and I will go through with this rant because I absolutely there is a combination I genuinely dislike in the world of confectionery, and this is really important to make that distinction, is mint and chocolate. And the reason, and there are a few things that I want to caveat about this. I don't think the combination doesn't work. Yes, thank you, Eddie. I don't think the combination doesn't work. I think the issue is more about the execution. And we've talked about this even with spirit. We've talked about this with drams. We've talked about this with pairings. There's so many elements in between all of this that we're always trying to find ways to, elevate our experience, right? And so with mint and chocolate, my issue with it is it's always a very, very sweet confectionery milk chocolate. So it's almost like that, you've got that cloyy sugar that kind of sits in the back, and then you're constantly going for water. At the same time, you've got this hyper, when they use flavorings, right, which we all detest in our world of whiskey, you get this real minty, like menthol note that's almost overbearing and overpowering. So with this one, I thought, look, I want to go down the lane of nostalgia. I mean, this is a great distillery as well to have some fun with. Distillery 73 being I believe a workhorse distillery, right? In some retrospect, yeah. And the first thing that I noticed, and you're welcome to nose this before you take a sip. The first thing I got, and I don't know if the rest of you get it, is this herbaceous tinge, right? But then it starts off, to me, almost starts off like thyme. And then it starts to kind of dip into almost this kind of green mint tea-like note as well. So before we actually do a sip of our whiskey, we're going to do the same thing that we did at the start, which was we're going to take a little chomp of our chocolate first. And there's a reason why I've adapted this, because I'd like you to taste the elements of nostalgia that we've built for today. And that is mint chocolate ice cream. So we've used roll-dried spearmint to create that beautiful creamy-like sensation. So you're going to get this more kind of mint ice cream, almost gelato-like in nature, extremely creamy, all front palate, and then it switches very quickly just about now into that kind of more Moorish cookies and cream ice cream base. Now, we made our own for the first time because we all know I can't bake for shit, but I've actually taken the attempts into making my own Oreo cookies, which was an absolute pain in the ass, I'll tell you that now, because it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be, but it turned out all right. And so you get this kind of real nostalgia effect. Now, as someone who doesn't like mint, I enjoy this. And I'm not being biased because I'm quite critical of my own work, but I think this is just something that I think is what I would desire the balance of both worlds to be. If there's a perfect world and I had to have mint and chocolate, this is kind of what I would envision it to be. Now I invite you to take a sip of your dram, please. This will be the most interesting part. That huge punch at the front of your palate, almost instantly mint intense, right? But less menthol-like, more cooling, more green and herbaceous. It starts to drop down a little bit. Take a bigger bite of your chocolate right about now, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already done so. I think this is where it really changes to being more biscuity, creamy, salty, and more ice cream-like in nature, but you still got the milk chocolate shell kind of breaking down around the sides of your palate, so you get more mint choc chip ice cream, but the desired version of what you're hoping it to be. I feel like 80s in La La Land right now. And so it's just going to kind of get a bit more richer, a bit more sweeter, and it doesn't, the mint is there at the front of your palate, but you start to notice that there's less and less of it as you're getting more of the other parts of the dark cocoa. You're getting more of that chocolate as well in the back palate as well. You're getting some more of that salt. Once again, I have intentionally fucked with everyone by putting a gram of salt in there. And it's all part of that whiskey doing the work for you. What do we think? I'm seeing a lot of so goods and things, so I feel like we've done it justice.
Dude, that is next level, and I say that in the context of you always hitting the next level, but that is next level.
Appreciate it, thank you.
And something you talked a lot about mint there. Have you? I'm sure most people have probably had that experience where when you have really cheap maple syrup from the supermarket,
yes,
and then you have the real stuff from Canada.
Yeah.
And you see that enormous difference between what we'll call fake cheap and the real deal. As I was experiencing flavors in both the chocolate and the whiskey there, and you kept on talking about mint, that was the difference for me. It was like, cheap confectionery mint or that horrible mint that you get in mint and chocolate that you were talking about earlier. And then this mint, which is just something completely different. It's like that pure maple syrup experience where it's such a vast.
So the beauty about this one was this is purely by chance on eBay, of all places in the world. I didn't expect to find this. There was this is a supplier I've started purchasing some little fun goodies from. We did something last year in September, just after our last August outturn. And I got a chance to find out that they were using, very commonly in chocolate today, we're using things like freeze-dried ingredients, right? It's very common to have freeze-dried strawberries and raspberries crumbled over, and you go to your fellow places like Cocoa Black, and you can get the little pan chocolates of the little things like that. But this one here, what they actually do is they use the old school methods called roll drying. So it's like two giant rolling pins that kind of run in an anti-clockwise way, and the whatever the element that's inside that they might use, so whether it's mint or thyme or whatever herbs, spices, you name it, they'll roll dry this process because generally it's used for things that have a high moisture content, right? But in order to maintain, I don't know if you've noticed this, if you ever make pesto, and if you blitz it too quickly, it starts to oxidize very quickly, right? So to avoid that oxidation, there's sort of like a cooling jet that runs through at the same time. So this was with pure spearmint, which is kind of something that's more accessible than peppermint in Australia. And hence the reason for the purity when we talk about something that's there. So in terms of being able to have this mint not go into a point that it becomes almost too grassy and overly herbaceous was kind of the part of where I had to spend some time trying to tinker that, because all I could do with this is actually having that roll-dried spearmint powder with the refiner stones, that if anyone here has followed our Instagram profile, if you haven't done so, you better do that today. And you'll see that we use these melenga stones, which are the same kind of refiner stones that are used for making chocolate and all those couvertures that we did in the past. So instead of doing a couverture for this one, I actually just did a white chocolate with a small percentage of this really hyper intensified, almost concentrate version of this spearmint powder. I remember opening the seal bag for it, and I kind of double wrapped it and everything, and I put it in another Glad wrap bag, and I put it away inside my wine fridge. And then I before I took it out, and that I've got a backup wine fridge on top of our holding cabinet, opened it up, and all I could smell in the entire thing was just spearmint. So it is very, very intense, and I think it was only like a small bag of like 300 grams because of how much they would have had to have used in order to make, even 300 grams. The chances are it probably would have been like a kilo and a half worth of spearmint just to make that thing. So it's very intense, and a lot of caution was exercised with regards to the intensity, because I just know for a fact that the whiskey would have done a lot more.
Why do I get the feeling that you don't actually have any wine in your wine fridges at home?
No, I don't. I do not. It's all just more ingredients and more things that I need. Yeah, 100%. There's actually 2 other things in there that I'm going to be using coming up. So,
mate, we say this every tasting, and I know we've got one to go, but I just have to dip my lid here. That was just an amazing culinary experience.
No, thank you.
Unreal. I'm going to agree. That's the best pairing yet. And it's I think there was a comment earlier just in here about how it was their least favorite chocolate. Yeah, Whiskey in Isolation saying my least favorite chocolate, but so far my favorite pairing. I'd almost be inclined to agree with that. It's a funny thing to say, but it's kind of true that flavor for me. And I'm not a huge fan of mint and chocolate together like that. I like mint, I like chocolate, but it's like,
as a creator, Matt, sorry to interject, but as a creator, I would agree with that, because this is not my traditional approach. As a personal bias, I don't enjoy that as a chocolate, but it has to be an approach in regards to the task at hand, which is for us to be able to kind of do something that allows us to be as nature intended.
Nice.
There you go, Eddie. That's for you.
Where do you go to after that? That's
that's
unreal.
All right. Cool. Well, should we do lucky last? Are we ready for that?
Yeah, I think we might be. Just one more comment.
I want to know who the troll that just wrote that. Which it's got to be Tim Grant, probably.
That's a good comment. That's quite funny.
It's got to be Tim Grant. It's got to be Tim Grant. Ban him from the SMWS.
Yep. Just a quick reminder for everyone: all four of the 5 casks are available except the 68.80. Of course, you can grab them on our site right now with that QR and use the code BASIK15 BASIK15 for your free shipping tonight only. So we will. We might press on to the next one though. I think we're good to go. Also, folks, just as we head into this last one, just keep in mind, maybe have a think about what your favorite is of the night. So we'll be asking you just at the end what your favorites were, and just we'd love to hear sort of the crowd feedback for your favorite of the night of your pairings. So let's push this up onto the screen, and it's 10.241 Sound of Singing Sand. Of course, it's with the last chocolate bar, which is that sort of bluish grayish kind of one. It's quite dark with the light blue speckles on it. I'm gonna bring up Adam's screen because he's got obviously a camera that works.
Yeah. It's got a like a gold strike through line.
Yep.
As well.
That's
There
good.
it is.
Yep. So it's actually like a black gray, kind of like midnight gray with a bit of a gold line strike through and also a bit of silver on the end. But yeah, that's kind of what it's supposed to look like. It's always tricky with colors as well, because sometimes the dyes always have its own effect when it's out of the mold and done and ready to go.
Yeah. Okay, so pouring that 10.241. Now, just I might just jump in on this whiskey before we jump into this one, Krsna. I was just going to say this is one of the only single cask festival bottlings that we got this year, and it was very popular with members. So I wanted to throw something peated in for Krsna to work with, but also something quite special. So this was the last edition because this one came out just in May, and this is August now. So we needed to really get this to him in time to work all this out. But yeah, we had some rare releases this year, but we also had this 9-year-old, and it's a PX cask from Distillery 10, which Andrew can tell us is definitely a clue to which distillery this is in his green screen right now. He's sitting at the distillery right now. But Krsna, tell us about this pairing.
So very quickly, I would just ask, don't take a sip of your whiskey.
Oh, come on.
No. Well, no, you take a little sip of water if you've already done that and just clear your palate. I just highly recommend. There's a reason for this. This is a very, very special chocolate. So I want to preface this to all of you. As you might know, that that Basic runs its little monthly packs. A lot of you are my customers as well, so I thank you very much for your support. This is purely this pairing has purely been made for today as an exclusive for Outturn this year. And this is something I went out of my way to create this because there's no the limitations around the ingredients itself involved in this has a lot of history, a lot of magic, and a lot of specialty. I'm going to dive straight into it and let them know what it is. This is an aged miso caramel with a toasted white sesame praline. Now, the aged miso, it's something I mentioned. There's we fortunately through a contact in food who runs a wonderful restaurant over at the Gold Coast called Palette.hota, which is the arts center and exhibition over in the Gold Coast. And the restaurant there run by Chef Diane Hartle Law is a good friend of mine, and he sort of put me into this aged miso. Now, this miso has been aged for 116 months. This is a reserve stock for their restaurant. And they have already, I don't know whether they're still using much of it for their restaurant at the moment, but I basically was given the permission to actually buy a reserve stock of this to be used for this event itself. You're welcome to take a little chomp of your bar if you'd like to, and I will start discussing that with you. I'll give you a 3, 2, 1. You can take a little chomp. This is probably without a doubt one of my favorite things that I've ever made. This might actually have crept into the top 3 of all time, might even be number 1. So much flavor, lots of umami, dark soy sauce all early at the start, and then it just starts to mellow down into that kind of buttery, salted caramel that you're so familiar with. But at the same time, there's that little sugariness that comes through from the sesame itself, right? And that's kind of where it really shines. It just becomes very biscuit-like in nature. This is exactly age statement miso. and you just get this beautiful kind of Moorishness. Now, I grew up in Malaysia, so this is very much something quite nostalgic for me, like the sesame cookies that you can get during Chinese New Year. It's just something really, really Moorish. Now, let's take this up a notch while everyone's in the zone. Take a sip of your whiskey now and watch that transformation. Almost instantly on the palate, you're greeted with this real strong caramel biscuit-like note. It's more chocolatey than it is actually like a butter caramel. The gooiness is not quite there. So I invite you to take an even bigger chomp of your chocolate now as you've got some of that whiskey through, you'll start to notice that the peat is now starting to creep in when it was almost absent early on as well. It's kind of lightly smoked. It's gentle. It's just kind of like slowly engulfing the rest of your palate as you start to salivate, because now it's more kind of amalgamated. It's more cohesive compared to what you had before. It's creamy, it's buttery, it's sweet, it's soft. And then now it just kind of just breaks apart as you get a little bit of that kind of chewy nuttiness that's almost there. It's almost hazelnut-like and peanut butter-like as well in nature, even though there's zero peanuts involved, of course. And it just becomes just really, 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 really moreish. You're just going to be salivating. So I've always promised everyone that at least out of 1 out of 5 chocolates, you will get at least one culinary orgasm. If you're not having one right now, let me know, and I'll figure something out for you in the meantime.
I think I'm going to need another 4 of those. I don't know. Just in case.
Madam.
What was that?
Like, to me, I know we mentioned like great pairings, and we talked about the last one. We talked about number 2. We talked about number 3, but I still feel that based on what I read in the room last time, and also for me personally, I think this is one of the most unique things. I also really want to give a quick shout out to Rice Culture, which is where we procured that miso from. So Tomoko is an artist herself. If you think I'm an artist, she's truly an artist and a producer that's winning a lot of awards. You can actually buy her miso very easily on their website. And recently, she actually gifted a reserve of aged miso over to the Emperor of Japan as part of her receiving an honorary award in Japan for like a producer's award. For still using the traditional methods of making miso here in Australia as like sort of like an expat would. And so that's the reason why we have something so amazing, is because of that. So yeah, thank you, Dave. I'm glad I broke your brain. Hopefully not to the Shutter Island sort of side, but hopefully still able to bounce back from that, mate.
Yeah, I think you broke Dave's brain. That's something else. Comments coming in.
Just rename this one to lobotomy.
I'm seeing a lot of comments, which I think are very, very much similar to the reactions that we got in Melbourne as well, right?
I like the comment from Whiskey in Isolation. I don't know if we're going to put that up, Matt. It's a bit blue, but
yeah, I think I'll just leave that for the side chat. I think
people
see it. Yeah, thank you, Justin.
Now I'm really curious about what Justin has said.
I just hope he's not alone like he is on a Friday night. That would be the sad thing. But
yeah.
It's Tuesday night.
It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is utterly brilliant, Krsna. That is fantastic, and I think that is an outstanding pairing.
What I love about it is anytime you give most creators the opportunity to pair with a peated whiskey, they'll play on the smoke, and you tend to have a pairing that lifts the smoke and lifts the peatedness. This one plays with everything that's in this whiskey apart from the smoke.
Exactly. But have you noticed as well that midpoint allows the smoke to still be there and present without it being lost?
100%. It's there, but it's side by side in the scrum. It's not the the hooker or the lock at the back. Forgive me for using New South Wales parlance there, but
is that what
wow, just extraordinary.
No, thank you. I'm very appreciative. I'm very humbled. And then looking at all the little comments that are coming up on the screen on the side here, which is why you see my eyes darting off to the left there all the time. But I'm very grateful. Thank you very much, everyone, for a lot of your kind comments, and I'm very, very appreciative. And I'm really glad that you all had an opportunity to experience, I suppose, the next progression in pairings that we've done for this. We've done it now for 4 years, and I think we've always tried to find an opportunity to step up each time. And I'm glad that we've still been given opportunities to be, and it's not just me in part of this process. This is very much part of Matt and team and Adam, AD, and Susie as well in the background, and helping curate all of this stuff for all of you to kind of be a part of this thing. And this has been an absolute treat and an absolute blast. And yeah, I just can't thank you all enough for your support and your encouragement as well. It's truly something that allows me to continue with the crazy brain with coming up with some more fun ideas. So thank you.
Just having a look at the votes coming through of which the favorite was. A lot of people saying the 73 and the mint 73 was the favorite, which is cool. Luke Davey was on the mint. Betty's a peated whiskey tragic. Betty, we know you are, and we love the fact you joined in on so many of the virtuals. It's Paul says it's one of the best he's ever had since the beef fat curvature. We're voting for the last one. We've got a team voting for the last one here. Pure artistry, yes. Favorite was the 73 until that 10. Yeah, it looks like that last one's won it, and I can see why.
I feel like the last one is just got so much flavor as well. Do you know what I mean? Like it is, because you keep in mind, like, we've talked about this last some of the previous events where we've gone with a very umami focused sort of flavor, and because it is the definition or the sixth sense that we have in terms of our taste, I'm not surprised that the miso has kind of been the one that would end up being the crescendo and the big punch at the end. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, AD, but Ed and Matt actually, Adam, you might not have been with us at that time for the first one, but I don't know if you both remember ages ago, we talked about how you were surprised when I said that the order we should end on peat. And I think now for the last 4 years, because I think you mentioned something about how in most pairings situations or events that you've conducted over the many years in whiskey, that most people would never dare to put a peated whiskey at the very end. And we've actually successfully done that in our lineup over the last 4 years without fail, which has been good fun. I think it's nice to break the curve and break the mold a bit, I think.
Yeah, and you know how much I relish in throwing you absolute curveballs of casks every time we do this, and especially when last year sent you hot shots and you called me up and said I can't work with this rum, and I said, well, give it a go. And
hey, look, it wasn't easy, and keep in mind, like even I would say this, like that. I think personally the biggest challenge in this whole lineup was the Armagnac. Because it's not because there's anything, like I said, I think it's because there's so much to it, right? There's a lot of complexity to this Armagnac, and as a fan of Armagnac, it's got, all these undertones and nuances in between. It was definitely a challenge to try and just pick a lane that would actually work. And I still went with something that was left of center. Instead of doing something that was quite linear to work with, I picked the most outrageous pairing that had 3 layers in it and said good luck. So, I'm glad it worked out. So, yeah, perfect.
Well, Krsna, thank you very much for another successful 2023 pairing with you, and it's been really good working with you again. These pairings have been outstanding, and thank you, AD and Adam, for joining us along on this journey and chatting about each pairing and each flavor as we went. We'll be collaborating.
It was a real burden, Matt. I'm oh gosh, wow.
Life sucks.
Hard work. Brisbane members, keep an eye out for the new date. We're going to have to set a new date for when we pair up with Krsna in Brisbane. That date of this Saturday is being postponed for reasons outside of our control. But we have to. We'll be moving that date to another date. I'd say closer to Whiskey in Brisbane, which will be around the 14th or just after that, in that week after.
Looking forward to seeing everyone at Whiskey as well at the SMWS station too.
And I do love taking a moment now at the end of these tastings to do the first sneak preview of what's sort of coming next month in terms of virtuals and experiences. So I can show you the cover now. Here we go. So that's the cover of our upcoming outturn, September outturn for the gathering, which is extremely exciting. And of course, that means
This Friday.
will be in your inboxes this Friday. There's the cover. No other sneak peeks just yet, apart from, I guess we could do the reveal now of the virtuals that are going to be included in next month, which is the Gathering Outturn, which is the Gathering virtual. And of course, I know a lot of you have already seen this one online already, but of course, it's the Guinness World Record official attempt that we're going to be doing as part of our celebration of 40 years of the club, which we'll talk more about at a later date. So that's all from that side of things at the moment. Thank you, Krsna, again. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate everyone who tuned in, and to the 100+ people that bought these packs, that got these virtuals in their mailboxes so they could enjoy these at home. So we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you, sir. Well
Thanks,
done
Krsna.
again.